In this video, we're gonna learn everything about components in Framer. Well, you could ask Nandi, why do I need to learn components? Well, it's because if you look at this dynamic menu component here, it looks really nice. It's created in Framer, it is a real website. If you master components in Framer, you can literally create things like this. And so I guess that's a pretty good reason to learn components. And you can use components for other things as well, like breakpoint optimization and stuff like that, but we're gonna talk about that a little bit later. So if you want to learn components and you want to master them, you want to learn how variants work, how variables work, how event variables work, how you can create different interactions, hover states, press states, and stuff like that, make sure to stick around until the end of the video. My name is Nandi, this is Framer University, and let's get started. And just a side note here, this video here could easily be in a paid Framer course, and I'm sharing it for free. So if you want to pay me, make sure to like this video and subscribe and even drop a comment. In the first section of this video, I'm going to talk about what components are used for. So I already mentioned the interactivity, so you can create these crazy interactions like this dynamic menu. But if we think about the definition of a component, we can say that a component is a reusable element on my Framer website, for example. So we can say that components are also used for the ease of reusability. Why is it important for us? So you can see this project here on my screen. This is, by the way, a project that you can remix with the link in the description. So we have this button, for example, on the middle of this website, and this is just a simple frame. It's not a component. Well, a button on a website will be placed a few times. So probably we're going to have it maybe tens or even hundreds of times. So let's say we have these 5 buttons here on my screen, and I change my mind. I want to use a different color, or maybe I want to add a new icon into this button. So what can I do? I can go ahead and select all of them one by one and change the color on each of them. And I have to do it on each page because now these are on the same page. So if these buttons are used on other pages as well, I would need to go to a different page and do the same one by one on each button. Well, this is not really a great thing. I don't want to do that. I want to have a component that I can reuse multiple times. So let's take a look at how that would work. So for example, if this button is a component, which as you can see right here, if we show these other 3 instances of this component as well, now we have a few buttons. And now if I want to change the color and add an icon, it's really easy. I just have to double click into the component. I can go ahead and change the color. So I can have like this purple or this pinkish color, and then I can add an icon as well. And then if I go back to my canvas, to my main page, you're going to see that each and every component instance changed. So this is the ease of reusability. We can create components for navbars. So I can just reuse this navbar on each and every page. And if I change something about the main master component, it will be visible on all other instances of that component. So ease of reusability, really useful. Another thing is a breakpoint optimization. So if we take a look at this navigation bar, for example, you're going to see that we have the established breakpoint, and on this phone breakpoint, we have a mobile optimized version of this component. And this is thanks to it being a component. If this element wasn't a component, we couldn't optimize it for mobile, and we couldn't make this little drop down interactivity. We couldn't add this to the element. So that's also a reason why we should use components. So now we can go on to the second section of this video, which will be about creating a component and seeing how it works actually in practice. So I'm going to just delete all of these buttons here, and I'll just draw a frame. I'm going to press F on my keyboard, draw a frame. I'm going to set maybe 44 pixel height, and then maybe 200 pixels for the width for now. and I realized that that's a bit too wide, so let's go with 100. So we have this frame here. I'm gonna use a different color, so maybe this gray, and then I'm gonna round its corners. So we have this frame. It's gonna be just a simple toggle, so let's call this toggle. We're gonna create a toggle component here. So within this, of course, we need a little circle, so that's gonna be another frame. As you might already know, frames in Framer are used really often. So this will be another frame in here. I'm gonna have maybe 8 pixels from the left, 8 pixels from the top and from the bottom. And we're gonna also round these corners. And maybe we can make this a little bit bigger. So let's select this circle here, make it a little bit bigger, and then also change that left pin to 5. So we have 5 pixels from the top, left and bottom. And so this will be renamed to circle. And I think I'm gonna give it a color of like this gray. So then I can maybe make it a little bit smaller in terms of width. And so this is now a simple, frame, simple element in Framer, this toggle, but we can turn this into a component. So there are 2 ways to turn something into a component. First, you can go and right click, create component, or you can also see this little shortcut, which I usually use because, if you learn it, it's much faster. So Option Command and K on your keyboard, and you have this little module, you can create the new component here. So now we're going to be taken into this new canvas, which is basically the component canvas. Here we can add new variants, here we can add hover and press states, so we can customize everything about this toggle component here. Our components are also visible here on the assets panel. So if we go to assets panel, we're going to see all of the components here, and we'll be able to just drag and drop them to our canvas, which I cannot do here on the component canvas, but as you can see, if I come back here, I can just drag and drop and reuse these multiple times. But let's go back to the component. I can just double click and we're gonna be back here on the component canvas. As you can see, we now have just one variant. This is the primary variant. If we, for example, want to give this component a hover state, we just have to click below the primary variant and we can add a hover state, for example. So let's say I want to change something about this component's style on the hover state. Let's say I want to change the color of the background, so maybe this 8. And then if we press Command and P to preview this, you're going to see that as I hover over this toggle, it is going to go into the hover state. You can see that the background color is changing. I can also add a pressed state. So if I click this, then pressed, I can add a press state, which might be even, lighter. And you can see that I hover and then I click and it goes into the press state. Then I release the click, it goes back into hover state. And if I leave with my mouse, it is going to go back to the default state. It is really important to mention that this is not the only way to add a hover state to a component. There's another way to add a hover state. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But to add the pressed state to a component, this is the only way. So now let's go into the third section of this video and talk about the variants, because that is really important. As I already talked about this bottom option here where we can add hover and press states, we also have this right option where you can see this plus icon and the variant under that. This basically means that if you click that, a new variant will be created. So as you can see, this is named variant 2. So now we have variant 1 as the primary variant and variant 2 as a new variant. It is really important to know that every single change that we do on the primary variant will be reflected on all other variants. So for example, if I now change this circle's color to blue, it will be changed on variant 2 as well. However, if I overwrite some properties of the circle on variant 2, let's say the color, I change it to maybe pink. Then if I go back to the primary and I change it again, you're gonna see that it is no longer gonna change on variant 2 because we made an override to the color property. You can also see it if you click into the circle, go to the right panel and take a look at the fill property. It has this little color And you can also click that and reset override. So when you have this color next to property, it means that it has an override. So if I want these to still keep following the primary variant's fill color, then we can reset override, and now it's gonna nicely follow those property changes. Now let's say that we want to create an on and an off variant for this toggle. So this variant 1 can be renamed to off, and then variant 2 can be renamed to on. So here I can not only change the color of the circle, but I can also change its position. So I can just press my left arrow keys to move it to the right, and then I'll make sure that we have 5 pixels from the right. I'm going to also make sure that the right pin is activated here. So it's going to keep that 5 distance from the right, and also make sure that the bottom is 5. I'm pretty sure that it was 5 here as well. Yes. So now on variant on, we moved this circle to the right. And then we might also change the color to this accent color. And I think it could be a little bit lighter. And yeah, this is a great on variant. So now all we have to do is to use interactions in some way to make sure that when we click this toggle, it will go to the on variant. So to use interactions in components, we have 2 options. We can either drag from this little connector. So I don't know why it disappeared when I zoomed in too much, but we just have to zoom in this much and we will see that little connector, and we can drag and connect it to the on variant. Now this basically means that we are creating an interaction from the off variant to the on variant. So when a certain trigger happens on the off variant, we go to the on variant. Here in this little window, we have to select that trigger. So we can either have click, click start, appear, mouse enter, or mouse leave. So click will basically mean that when we click off, we go to on. Click start means that it's basically the same, but it's a little bit different. Click means that when you press down and when you release the click, that is going to be when the trigger fires. On click start, it fires when you click down and it doesn't wait until you release the click. Well, appear will be a bit different. We're going to talk about it a little bit later. Mouse enter is when you hover over this off variant, and then it's going to go to on variant, and mouse leave is triggered when you hover over and then leave the variant with your mouse. So now, of course, we're going to use click because I want to make sure that when I click off, we go to on. And when I say we go to on, it might sound a bit weird because what do you mean by we go to on? Well, it's really easy. Framer basically animates smartly between these states. So it's gonna just nicely animate the circle from left to right. Let's take a look at that. I hover over, click, and it animates the circle to the right, and it also changes its color. Well, there's a problem though, and that's the fact that if I click this again, we're just not going back to the off variant. So we have to create another interaction for that. So as I said, there are 2 ways to create an interaction. We can either drag from this connector or press the variant that we're gonna connect from, then press down the L key on our keyboard, and then we have the connector. Again, a little shortcut might make your life a bit faster. So then we connect back to off, and this will be the same click interaction. So we have 2 interactions, one from off to on click, and one from on to off, on click. Let's take a look at that. As you can see, I can just continue clicking this toggle and it will just continue working. It will go from on to off as I click these different variants. We can also change how these animations are transitioned. So if I want something a little bit faster, I can click the primary variant, go to the right panel, and then click this little transition. And here I can have ease or this spring type. So if I want something a little bit slower, I can type in 100 here, and then it's going to be really slow. As you can see, if I click that, it's going to transition into variant 2 so much slower. What you need to understand about these transitions though is that these are also overridable on different variants. So now this transition is applied on the on variant as well. If I change this transition on the on variant, so if I change it to, let's say, instant, then what this will basically mean is that when we come to the on variant, it is going to be an instant transition. However, the primary off variant still has the spring. So when we go to the off variant from the on, it's gonna be still animated. Let's take a look at that. We go to off with an instant transition. We go back to on with a nice spring transition. Okay, so now let's remove these interactions. You can see that they are also added on the right panel. You can see it below the interactions. I'm going to remove these click interactions, and then I'm going to show how appear works. So I can connect an appear interaction from the off. So let's just connect it to on. It was going to happen on appear. Well, appear basically means is that when this off variant appears on the website, this interaction will fire. Here we can also set a delay. So if the delay is 0, then it will basically mean that as it appears, it instantly goes to the on variant. However, if we have like 1 delay, then it will basically mean that it will wait 1 second and only then it will go to the on variant. So let's do that. We wait 1 second and then we go to on. I'm going to also make sure that we change it back to spring here so we can see the interaction. So I preview this. We wait 1 second and then it will just automatically go to the second variant. So in theory, I can make sure that this just goes from one variant to the other and it just loops forever. So now we have the appear on the off. We go to on with that, but we can connect from on to off with the same appear, and then we will have the same 1 delay here. And you'll see that it will just go from left to right, left to right. However, as you can see, there's a strange thing happening. We don't really wait 1 second on a certain state. It doesn't even reach the fully the right or the left side of the toggle, and it starts going back to the other direction. So why is this happening? The reason why this is happening is because technically the on appears as soon as we wait 1 second from the off transition. Even though we have a transition on this, which is really long, it's really slow, the on variant technically appears as soon as that 1 second delay was over. It was now the on variant, even though we cannot see it fully because we haven't transitioned into it. So when we use appears and we use delay with appear, it's really important that the delay on that specific variant where we are going from is longer or equal to the transition time to make sure that we don't have this overlapping. For example, if we have 1 second delay here, we need to make sure that these transitions are a little bit faster than that. So I can just increase this, and you can see the preview here, it's probably faster than 1 second. So maybe 570 here, and let's see if it has it here as well. It doesn't, so let's change it on primary too. And now we are gonna see that since we are now transitioning between these variants much faster, we also wait a bit more on these states. So just remember this one thing: when you are using appear with delay, make sure that when you are going with an appear transition, for example, from off to on, and you use a delay, make sure that that specific delay is either the same time as this variant's transition time or a little bit longer than that. I also told you that there's another way to add hover interactions to these variants. So again, to recap, the first way is to just click below the variant and add the hover state. We can do this with each variant. However, there's another way as well. So let's explore that. If we click this variant here and we create a hover variant, we can then create an interaction where we go from off to hover and on mouse enter. So when we enter this off variant, we go to hover. As you can see, when I hover this off variant, it goes to hover, but then nothing happens. When I leave the element, it doesn't go back to off, because of course we have to connect this back to off with not a mouse enter, but a mouse leave interaction. So on mouse enter, we go to hover. On mouse leave, we go back to off. So let's take a look at this. I enter and then leave, and the hover, works perfectly. As you can see, this is a little bit harder, like it takes more steps to create a hover state this way. So you can pick your own, way of doing your hover states. You can also just click here, hover, or do it with interactions. One more thing I want to mention about interactions is the fact that you cannot only just connect from these main variants, from the variant frames. We can also connect interactions from these specific elements that are within the variant. So for example, I can connect an interaction from the circle. So if I connect it here on click, and if I change something about this on the variant 2, then what will happen is that we are going to be waiting for a click on the circle, and that's when the interaction will happen. If I click on the circle, we go to the other variant. If I click anywhere else, it's not going to happen. So really important, we can connect interactions from elements within. It is really useful when we, for example, have a navigation bar and we want to go from the mobile open to mobile close states when we click that little hamburger menu. And now that we talked about how we can use variants with interactions, we can also talk about how that breakpoint optimization is working when we are using components, because as I mentioned it earlier, we can use components for breakpoint optimization, but how exactly we are doing that? Well, it's really easy. Let's just take a look at this navigation bar, for example. As you can see, it has different variants. It has a desktop and then a mobile open and a mobile close. Let's just ignore mobile close entry for now. It's a bit advanced. Usually you're just gonna have mobile open, mobile close. As you can see, on mobile open and mobile close, we change some things about the navigation bar. If you, by the way, want to learn how to create this navigation bar from scratch, how to structure it properly so you can optimize it really easily on these variants, then take a look at my video. It's going to be in the description. It's a YouTube video that basically explains this step by step. So you can see we have mobile open, mobile close, and we can just basically go on that specific breakpoint, for example, mobile, and we can change the variant of the component here on the right panel. We can change it to desktop, and of course, that's not what we need. We need mobile close, and yeah, as you can see, it just works perfectly. So that's how we can use components and variants to optimize different elements for different breakpoints. So now we know a bunch of things about components, and you might feel like an expert. But I hate to break it to you, you're not really an expert yet. We have to learn a bunch of things. For example, let's say you have this card here, this resource card. You duplicate this a few times because you have, multiple cards on your site. And then you're like, okay, now I want to change the title of the card and the image and maybe the subtitle as well. And then you're like, what do I do? I click into the component. I change the text here. I go back and it changed everywhere. What do I do? Well, here comes component variables. If you have a component like this resource card that you are probably reusing on multiple pages because it is a component, it's for reusability, and you still want to customize some of the elements of this component on different instances. So here I want to have a different image, here I want to have another image, different titles, different subtitles. Then you can use component variables. You have to go into the main component. So I just click into the main master component of this resource card, and I have to set up the variables here. We always do it on the primary variant just to make sure that the variables are applied on all other variants as well. So let's think about what elements I want to change about this component on different instances. The first element is probably the image. So I click the image frame, I go to the right panel, and here we have the field property. I can just click this, then create variable, and it's going to be an image variable. As you can see, we have this module as well. We created a variable, we can rename it, we can add description, set a default, and you're going to also see your variables here. If you click in the top bar, you're going to see all the variables for this component. What other variables we need? We need another variable for the title. So I click the text, go to the right, content, create variable, plain text. Boom, we have the title. Then same for the subtitle, content, create variable, plain text. We're gonna rename this now subtitle. Basically, that's it. That's all you need to do. Now, you're going to see these component properties on the right panel when you select each of these components. So I can come to the second resource card. I can change the image. So let me just choose an image from my Finder. I'm going to use this image here, and then we're going to use this title. As you can see, I'm just changing these text fields in these properties. And now you can see that we have two cards, each have the same hover state, but they have different images, different texts. Really, really cool. So now let's move into the last section of this video. We are really close to turning you into a master of components in Framer. We just need to learn this one last thing, which is event variables. As you can hear it with your ears, it's again another type of variable, but it can be a bit tricky. So let's say that you want to add an overlay to this resource card. You go to the right panel, then you click fixed overlay. We want to give it a fixed overlay. And then here I'm going to change this overlay's index to 10. And here, of course, I can add different elements to this overlay. Here, I'm just going to create this frame. I'll give it a gray color, and I'll maybe round its corners a little bit. So what this basically means is that now, as you can see, since we have show on click, when we click on this card, the overlay will be shown. If we click away, then we will hide that overlay. But we have a little issue here. What if I want to make sure that when I click the card, I go to a different page with a link. However, when I click this little quick preview button here, then we are going to see the overlay. Well, here comes the event variable. That's how we can basically bring out different triggers from within a component to the outside of that component. Now let's just delete this overlay, go within the resource card. As you can see, this quick preview button is a component. So we're going to go into that. And here we're going to create a chain of these event variables. So we click this primary variant, we go to interactions on the right panel, and we create a new event. This will be named event1. And if I click here, you're going to see that the trigger here is click. So this basically means that when I preview this and I click this event1 event is triggered. So now if I go back to the resource card, I can see that if I select the quick preview button, I can see this event1 right here. And I can do anything with it. Now nothing is connected to it, no interaction, no nothing. So it's just not going to do anything if I click that button. However, if I were to create another variant here, let's say variant 2, and if I change something about this, let's just hide the text here. And if I say that event1, when this happens, let's create a new transition and let's go to variant 2. Then when I click this quick preview button, we will go to the next variant. You're going to see that the text is hidden, as you can see it on variant 2. So that's one thing that we can create with events. However, what I can also do is I can create another event and just, bring this chain of events even further out. So if I create a new event, event 2, and let's just delete this click event that was generated for some reason. So we created this event 2 now, which will be visible in the outside of this component if we add the overlay. So now we add the overlay, fix the overlay, and here now we can change this show on to the event to event, which basically triggers when we click the quick preview button. That's where the chain of events starts. Now let's just, again, customize this overlay. This overlay is supposed to be a little preview of the resource that we're talking about, but I'm not gonna take time to recreate that. I just want to show you really quickly how this works. So now we're gonna see that when we hover over this card and we click it, nothing happens. But if we hover over the quick preview button and click that chain of events will start firing. It will start from within the quick preview button. So again, we added event 1 here. That event 1 appears here on the right panel. Again, in this resource card component, here we create another event, event 2, which then is accessible here at the canvas level where we are basically building the site. And so we can set that as show on for the overlay, show on event 2, it will open the overlay. So that's what we can use events for. I hope that it was somewhat understandable, somewhat easy to understand. And yeah, I think that's it. Now you are basically a master of components in Framer. I hope that this was helpful. I know that this could have been a paid course, but I just like giving away value for free, knowledge for free. I want you guys to succeed with Framer. So if you still want to pay me, you can subscribe, like this video, comment, these things are really, really helpful for me. So yeah, also check out framer.university for other useful free stuff, resources, remixes, tutorials, stuff like that. And yeah, make sure to subscribe for more, and I'm gonna see you in the next one.